The Runaway Groom and My Substitute Groom. Chapter 1. The Runaway Groom and the Alternative. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of St. Patrick's Cathedral, casting kaleidoscopic patterns on the polished marble floor. The bells that should have been ringing in celebration were silent. I stood alone by the altar, the bouquet in my hands heavy as lead. My groom was nowhere to be seen. "Are you telling me Leo Moretti has run away?" My voice was calm, but my knuckles were white. "Yes, Miss Amelia. His entourage says his car never headed for the church," the maid stammered, trembling. I could feel the suppressed rage behind me. My father, Robert Montgomery, looked livid. My mother, Susan, gripped his arm so tightly her nails nearly pierced his suit fabric. The Montgomery and Moretti families had spent months preparing for this union. Half of New York's high society had received invitations. The media had been hyping it for a week. If Leo had any objections, he could have voiced them at any time, pulling a disappearing act on the wedding day. This was a public slap in the face for the Montgomery family. My parents hurried off to a side room to discuss damage control, leaving me alone under the gaze of the packed hall, a mixture of prying eyes, pity, and thinly veiled mockery. I retreated into the shadows, my mind racing, trying to figure out how to salvage this. Just then, a subdued commotion came from the entrance. I instinctively looked up. A man walked in. He wore a perfectly tailored black Tom Ford suit, his posture as straight as a pine. That FaceTime had been exceptionally kind to him. 35. He looked no older than 28, with features as deep and classical as a sculpture, and calm, gray-blue eyes. He was Cedric Moretti, the current head of the Moretti family, and Leo's nominal father. Cedric rarely appeared at such public social events. Even I had seen him only a handful of times. His presence instantly captured the room's full attention. The previous whispers died away. Representatives from every family swarmed toward him like bees to nectar. Looking at that face, handsome enough to shame any magazine cover, a wild, insane idea sprouted from the darkest corner of my heart, winding its way up and breaking through. I watched him politely but distantly fend off the approaching crowd. Then, his gaze traversed the room and landed precisely on me. He strode over. "Mr. Moretti," I offered a standard, slightly pale smile, infusing my voice with just the right touch of grievance. He stopped before me, his tall frame casting an imposing shadow, but his voice was surprisingly steady, like the lowest cello string. "Miss Amelia, the Moretti family will give you an answer for today's events. I've already sent people to find Leo. Once he's found, he is yours to deal with." He paused, then continued, "I will announce a postponement of the wedding. All losses will be borne by the Moretti family. This is the most suitable solution I can offer at the moment." It was a perfect plan, minimizing losses and saving face for both families, but right now, I had a bolder, more satisfying choice. I looked up, meeting his penetrating gray-blue eyes. "Mr. Moretti, the Montgomery and Moretti families have a long-standing marriage alliance. But the subject of that alliance doesn't necessarily have to be Leo, correct?" His brow raised almost imperceptibly, his gaze deepening. "Theoretically, no. So, what is your choice?" I took a deep breath, blossoming into a smile brighter than the bouquet in my hand, and reached out to him without hesitation. "Would you be willing to become my groom?" Cedric was Leo's nominal father, but not his biological one. Rumors swirled in certain circles that Cedric had certain physical limitations, hence his never marrying. At 25, he had adopted a boy from a collateral branch of the family. That boy was Leo. Limitations didn't matter much to me. Modern medicine was advanced. There were always solutions if it truly couldn't be helped. Childless families weren't uncommon in New York either. Cedric looked at the desperate light and defiant smile in the girl's eyes, the corner of his mouth lifting in a faint arc. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." I was resolute. Compared to that spoiled brat Leo, Cedric was like a rare gem polished by time, handsome, mature, wielding power. Even if the rumors were true, gazing at this face and aura every day was infinitely better than being stabbed in the back by a shallow fool like Leo. Cedric studied me for a few seconds, as if assessing my resolve. Then, he extended his hand, his long, strong, beautifully jointed fingers closed firmly around mine. "As you wish." My heart seemed to be scorched by the warmth from his palm. Skipping a beat, the wedding changed its leading man on the spot. There wasn't even a need to change attire. My Vera Wang ivory wedding dress and Cedric's Italian bespoke suit were unexpectedly well matched. When the MC, holding the hastily revised script, announced in a loud voice, "The bride and groom may now exchange rings," The expressions in the audience were a sight to behold, from Cedric's appearance to him leading me up to the altar. The smart ones had already guessed most of it. Reporters' cameras flashed frantically, capturing this headline-grabbing scene. Cedric took out a ring and slid it steadily onto my ring finger. My turn came. I produced the ring originally meant for Leo. It was noticeably smaller. I gave Cedric an apologetic look. There hadn't been time to get a new one. He shook his head almost imperceptibly, indicating it was fine. I managed to push the ring past his knuckle. Then came the kiss. I grew nervous. Cedric was notoriously aloof and self-restrained. Never been intimate with any woman in public. Would he comply? Had I been too impulsive, dragging him into this farce? As I was lost in these thoughts, a soft warmth touched my lips. I opened my eyes in shock. Cedric's thick lashes and flawless skin were inches away. He was actually kissing me, seeming to sense my stiffness. He gently cupped the back of my head, deepening the kiss for a moment. I slowly closed my eyes. The sound that filled my ears was the thunderous applause of the guests, whether sincere or not. Chapter 2. The wedding night and a new identity. My parents were completely unaware of my sudden groom swap, but in front of everyone, they could only maintain polite smiles, accepting wave after wave of congratulations. During a lull in the toast, my mother pulled me into a lounge. My father was already inside, his expression complex. The door locked. Amelia, what on earth is going on? How did you end up marrying Cedric Moretti? Mother asked in a hushed, urgent tone. Because he's good-looking, I replied flatly. Even I found the reason weak. Good-looking. Mother recalled Cedric's impeccable face and had to admit, he is very handsome, but he's a full 12 years older than you, dear. He was in middle school when you were born. Age isn't an issue. They say mature men are more considerate. I insisted stubbornly. But I've heard he has some problems. Mother worried. Just then, the door was knocked. Mother opened it. Cedric stood outside. Who knew for how long? My parents instantly switched to flawless social smiles, as if their earlier doubts had never existed. Mr. Moretti, is there something you need? There are some matters I'd like to discuss with Mr. and Mrs. Montgomery. I didn't know what Cedric discussed with my parents, but when he and I reappeared at the reception, their attitude had done a complete 180. They even seemed quite approving of Cedric. Cedric is good, capable, shrewd, my father told me privately, though a complex emotion still lingered in his eyes at his daughter marrying a man of his generation. He can protect you. As for Leo, a coward who runs away at the last minute isn't worthy of my daughter. After the wedding, I moved into Cedric's penthouse on the Upper East Side. It was my first time here. The decor was minimalist modern, dominated by black, white, and gray cold, but with impeccable taste. The day's events were exhausting, and I was covered in the scent of champagne and crowds. Cedric went to shower first. I curled up on the soft sofa, listening to the faint sound of water from the bathroom. The blurred silhouette behind the frosted glass made me shift my gaze uncomfortably. The water stopped. Soon after, Cedric emerged. He wore a dark gray silk robe, the collar slightly open, revealing the lines of his collarbone and a hint of firm chest. His hair still dripping. For a moment, I was stunned. I hadn't expected such a good physique. Seeming to notice my blatant stare, a faint smile touched Cedric's lips. Go take a shower, Amelia. His voice, slightly hoarse from the steam, felt like a feather tickling my heart. I practically fled into the bathroom. Warm water washed over me, but my mind kept replaying his voice saying Amelia. I hadn't realized before how captivating this man's voice could be. Mid-shower, I froze. Had forgotten to bring my change of clothes. I cautiously cracked the bathroom door open a sliver, revealing half my damp face. Cedric, I forgot my pajamas. Could you hand them to me, please? They're in the bag on the sofa. Just pass me the whole bag. Silence for a few seconds outside. I thought he hadn't heard and was about to ask again. Okay. His voice came, even huskier than before. Then came footsteps and the rustle of fabric. Soon, he was at the bathroom door. Here. I reached out an arm and took the clothes he handed over. The moment our fingertips touched, a faint electric current seemed to pass through. Thank you. As I closed the door, I accidentally met his eyes. Deep within those gray-blue orbs, a dark fire seemed to be burning quietly. And when I looked down and saw what I was holding, not just the pajamas, but also the set of black lace lingerie I'd carefully chosen, my cheeks instantly flamed crimson. God. It asked him to hand me the whole bag. I dawdled in the bathroom for ages, but eventually had to come out. Steeling myself, I pulled the door open. Cedric had already changed into his pajamas and was leaning against the headboard, a file in hand. Seeing me, he closed the file, his expression calm as if nothing had happened. Relieved, I remembered the matter at hand. What about Leo? How do you plan to handle it? I walked to the bedside. He seemed prepared. He handed me the file H just been reading. Take a look. I took it. Inside was a detailed account of Leo's love story with a girl named Luna Green, straight out of a cheesy romance novel. The photo showed a blonde, blue-eyed girl in a simple white dress, the picture of an innocent little flower. The records indicated that over the past few months, these two had broken up and made up countless times, playing out scenes of let me explain and I don't want to hear it. Last night, Luna learned Leo was getting married, called him in tears. Leo felt heartache, had an epiphany, and thus abandoned his bride-to-be, eloping overnight with his true love. Marvelous. If I weren't the abandoned bride, I might almost applaud their epic love. What were these two doing all this time? The timeline showed their dramatic romance had been going on longer than the wedding preparations. If Leo had dropped even the slightest hint, I wouldn't have been put on the spot like this today. Leo is currently vacationing in Miami with his little girlfriend. I've sent people to invite him back. If you change your mind, our marriage arrangement can be annulled. Cedric's voice was calm, as if discussing the weather. Wed only had the ceremony, no legal registration yet. But why would I regret it? Tossing out the trash and picking up a treasure. This was my lucky day. We held the wedding. I am your wife. We'll go to City Hall tomorrow to register. My tone was firm. Cedric looked into my eyes, confirming I was serious. Good. You said before that Leo was at my disposal. Does that still stand? I flashed a sly grin. Of course. I want you to freeze all his accounts, credit cards, and revoke any company authorizations and assets in his name. Without money, let's see how this young master enjoys his true love getaway on Miami's sunny beaches. A flicker of amusement crossed Cedric's eyes. Instead of stopping me, he added fuel to the fire, effective immediately. He will lose all financial resources. Satisfied, Mrs. Moretti? The address Mrs. made my heart skip. Then I nodded, very satisfied. Making him suffer more naturally pleased me. With the scumbag dealt with, it was time for the next part. Then let's rest. Cedric seemed genuinely tired. Reaching to turn off the light, the room plunged into darkness. I lay stiffly on my side of the bed, not daring to move. First-time marriage, not quite familiar with the procedures. What came next? The legendary wedding night consummation? Just as I was lost in thought, wondering if I should take the initiative to test those rumors. Sleep. I won't cross the line until you're ready. His voice came steadily from the darkness. I relaxed, but that thought popped up again. A living, breathing beauty lying right beside him, and he could resist. Were the rumors true? It just closed my eyes when I heard a questioning sound beside me. Oops. It said that out loud. I immediately played dead, however. Less than 2 seconds after closing my eyes, a warm, heavy weight settled over me. Long, strong fingers clasped my waist. Scorching breath fanned my ear. Perhaps Madame would like to verify for herself? The truth was, one should never lightly provoke a long ascetic man, especially a man like Cedric Moretti. The consequences were borne by one's lower back. Chapter 3. Morning and unexpected visitors. I woke up the next day well past noon. The space beside me was empty and cool. Cedric was gone, of course. The head of a major corporation was always busy, ravenously hungry. I went downstairs to forage and was surprised to find Cedric sitting at the sun-drenched dining table, holding a copy of the Wall Street Journal. He wasn't in a suit today, just a simple white linen shirt, the top 2 buttons casually undone, revealing his collarbone and a faint, ambiguous mark from last night. Madam is awake. Did you rest well last night? He set down the newspaper, his gray-blue eyes turning to me, holding a hint of lazy satisfaction. The address and his suggestive tone warmed my cheeks, but I refused to back down verbally. Very well. Thank you for asking, Cedric. He seemed pleased by my response, the smile at his lips deepening. It seems Madame was quite satisfied with last night. That puts me at ease. This older man had thick skin. I couldn't compete. Huffing, I sat down at the table. I'm hungry. Cedric rose and went to the kitchen, bringing out the breakfast H kept warm. Something light, since you just woke up. Simple fare. A plate of delicate-looking handmade pastries, 2 side dishes of pickles, a bowl of fragrant, perfectly cooked congee. I was starving and past being picky. I eagerly tried a pastry. My eyes instantly lit up. Flaky, tender crust, savory filling. this is delicious. Which restaurant delivered it? I asked around a mouthful. Cedric only smiled. A thought struck me. Don't tell me. You made it? He admitted lightly, as long as it suits Madame's taste. I wanted to find something to criticize, but the flavor was truly impeccable. One shouldn't lie. It's very good. I praised honestly. Seeing me eat happily, satisfaction appeared in Cedric's eyes. By the time I finished dawdling over breakfast, it was nearly noon. I went upstairs to change. The decision to marry Cedric had been so sudden. Naturally, there were no clothes for me in the villa. I was still wearing an old outfit brought from home. Cedric's brow furrowed almost imperceptibly. He got up and stepped onto the terrace to make a call. By the time I was properly dressed and came downstairs, he was ready too. Let's go, Cedric. I went over and linked my arm with his. All right, in his casual attire today, with that face, he looked like a distinguished Ivy League student. Only, I pointed, blushing, at the faint marks visible below his collar. You're going out like that? Is there a problem? He raised a brow. I had to step forward and carefully adjust his collar, hiding those suggestive marks. Before taking his arm again, Cedric chuckled softly, his large hand completely enveloping my smaller one. At City Hall, looking at the freshly issued marriage certificate, I still felt somewhat dazed. Just like that, I was no longer single. I was legally Cedric Moretti's wife. But looking at the photo of us side by side, the man handsome and steady, the woman bright and beautiful, I had to admit, the picture was jarringly harmonious. My taste was truly excellent. Leo was splurging in Miami with his Luna. Once his financial lifeline was cut, this young master should come crawling back in disgrace within 2 days. I couldn't wait to see his expression when he found out I was now his stepmother. Cedric's thoughtfulness was meticulous. Returning from City Hall, I found the once empty walk-in closet now filled with the latest season's clothing. The jewelry cabinet glittered. Business cards from several well-known brand managers lay neatly on the dressing table. Pressing for time. Couldn't get custom orders. Pick what you like for now, Cedric said. Though I already own many similar pieces, the gesture touched me. I stood on tiptoe and planted a rewarding kiss on the corner of his mouth. As expected, with all accounts frozen, Leo found himself stranded in Miami. This young master never carried cash, fortunately. His Luna had some savings left. Using that money, they bought the cheapest economy class tickets and flew back to New York in disgrace. On the way, Leo fumed, blaming me entirely. It must be Amelia saying something to father, he thought angrily. But it didn't matter. Once back, marry Luna. Luna had given him her most precious first time. He had to give her a proper status. Once he took over the Moretti group from Cedric in the future, no one could interfere in his life. Fantasizing about his future happiness, his lips curled upward unconsciously. Chapter 4, A Surprise Reunion. After a bumpy overnight flight, Leo and Luna arrived in New York at dawn. They headed straight for Cedric's Upper East Side penthouse. Leo knew his father usually stayed there. At that moment, I was lazily curled up on the living room sofa, watching the morning financial news, waiting for Cedric's breakfast. These past few days of newlywed life had taught me that this man's ascetic exterior hid an utterly unrepentant incubus within. To enjoy some couple time, even given most of the staff short vacations, leaving only a cleaning lady who came periodically. Thus, the responsibility for 3 meals a day fell to Cedric. Luckily, he seemed to enjoy it, especially taking pleasure in watching me eat until my cheeks were puffed out, then mischievously poking them. Just then, the smart home system chimed. Madam, visitors at the front gate, identified as Mr. Leo Moretti and an unknown female. I shuffled over in my slippers to the control panel and pulled up the gate camera. On screen stood a travel-weary, ill-tempered Leo and beside him, a blonde girl in a simple white cotton dress who looked timid. Luna. They arrived faster than expected. Your eldest son is back with his true love. I walked into the open kitchen and wrapped my arms around Cedric's waist from behind as he fried eggs. He replied, focused on the perfect sunny side-up egg in the pan, his tone indifferent. Handle it as you wish. I'd been waiting for that. I leisurely went upstairs first, changed into a proper Chanel suit, carefully touched up my makeup, and then unhurriedly used the system to open the estate's outer gate. The estate was vast. There was a considerable distance from the gate to the main house. Normally, guests arrive by car, but unfortunately, the driver was also on the vacation list. I couldn't be bothered to fetch them, so they'd have to work hard and walk. Leo and Luna, having rushed straight from the airport, hungry and tired, waited anxiously outside the gate. Finally, the gate opened, only to be told they had to walk. Luna gazed at the expansive lawn, exquisite sculptures, and the imposing building in the distance, unable to hide the envy and greed in her eyes. "This place is huge," she murmured. "When we get married, I'll buy you a house like this too," Leo boasted, his vanity stoked. "No, Leo, that's too expensive. I'm happy wherever I am, as long as I'm with you." Luna leaned against him, her voice dripping sweetness. This display of dependence greatly satisfied Leo's male ego. "It's nothing, I'll buy you several in the future. You can switch between them," he declared grandly. However, when they finally stood before the grand entrance of the main house, Leo's courage began to wane. Towards Cedric, his nominal father, H always harbored a mix of fear and distance since childhood. As an adult, witnessing his father's ruthless business tactics had deepened that awe. But he was also confident that as long as he remained the Moretti family heir, his father wouldn't truly punish him over a mere runaway groom incident. He took a deep breath and pushed open the heavy oak door. "Father, the words caught in his throat, because what he saw wasn't Cedric, but someone who absolutely should not be here. I sat poised on the central sofa in the living room, offering the two stunned figures at the door an impeccable, almost benevolent smile. "Hello, Leo, did you have a pleasant trip?" Chapter 5. A role reversal. "Amelia, what are you doing here?" Leo looked as if H seen a ghost, instinctively stepping back and bumping into Luna, who was right behind him. "Ah!" Luna cried out in pain, tears instantly welling in her eyes. "Luna, are you okay?" Leo frantically turned to check on her. "I'm fine, Leo, as long as you're okay," Luna said, enduring the pain, still maintaining her fragile, considerate act. After calming Luna, Leo turned his fury back on me, his anger having clouded his judgment. "Amelia, I never thought you were this kind of person. Our wedding wasn't even completed. How can you have the shamelessness to stay here?" "I don't love you, it's over between us." "This is the one I love, Luna Green, we're getting married soon." I was almost amused by this self-absorbed monologue. What on earth gave you that idea, Leo? What made him think it'd cling to him? I reviewed all my interactions with Leo and was certain it'd never given him any wrong signals. "Miss Amelia," Luna chimed in at the perfect moment, her voice tearful. "I know you and Leo were engaged, but you weren't officially married after all. And Leo and I are truly in love. Please, let us be together." Tears streamed down her face as if she'd suffered a great injustice. Seeing this, Leo glared at me even more fiercely. "Amelia, you're going too far." Absurdity washed over me. I shook my head pityingly. Did the mental institution have a day off today? How did the two of you get out? It took Leo a moment to realize I was insulting him. His face flushed crimson. "You're the crazy one." Seeing my consistently cold, detached, utterly indifferent expression, his earlier doubts resurfaced momentarily. But then he thought, this was the Moretti home, not the Montgomerys. If Amelia wasn't here to pester him, why would she be? It was all to get his attention. Yes, that must be it. He barely suppressed his anger, adopting a tone of granting a favor. "Amelia, I'm in love with someone else. There's no future for us. Apologize to Luna now, and maybe we can still be friends in the future." Who wanted to be friends with them? Stupidity was contagious. Just as I was about to retort, a low magnetic voice came from the staircase. "What's going on?" We all looked over. Cedric had come downstairs at some point. H changed into a fitted black shirt that emphasized his broad shoulders and narrow waist, exuding an aloof, restrained aura. He carried two exquisite bone china plates, walked straight to the dining table, set them down, every movement elegant and composed. Luna stared, mesmerized. "Father, we're back," Leo blurted out eagerly, accusation in his tone. "What is this woman still doing here?" Cedric didn't even glance his way, simply extending a hand toward me, his voice gentle. "Come have breakfast. It's getting cold." Because I was standing close to Leo and Luna, when Cedric gestured, the two of them thought he was summoning them. "Father, you even prepared breakfast for us?" Leo was somewhat moved and tried to pull Luna toward the table. Luna, blushing, followed. However, before they could even touch the edge of the table, Cedric raised a hand to stop them. "Father?" Leo was confused. Cedric's hand remained outstretched toward me, his gaze focused. "Coming, darling." I immediately brightened with a radiant smile, trotted over, and right in front of them, placed my hand in Cedric's palm, turning back to see Leo and Luna's petrified expressions. I laughed even more delightedly, enunciating each word clearly. "Well, son, and this? Luna, is it? Come on, say mom first." Leo and Luna looked as if struck by lightning, frozen in place, mouths agape enough to fit eggs. Cedric, however, seemed oblivious to their shock. He seated me, pushed a plate toward me. Eat first. An empty stomach isn't good. The two standing figures remained dumbstruck for a full minute before Leo jumped as if scalded, his voice cracking. What? You two. When? This can't be. On the wedding day, of course, I said, cutting a perfectly cooked piece of bacon, speaking leisurely. You ran off. I couldn't let both the Montgomery and Moretti families become the laughingstock of the city, could I? So, I invited Cedric to be my groom. Surprised? Chapter 6. Cast out and a choice. Watching Leo's contorted face and Luna's disbelieving eyes, I was thoroughly pleased. Father, how could you marry her? Leo couldn't accept this reality. He pointed at me, voicing his worst suspicions. She's doing this on purpose. Father, she's getting revenge on me. And she's younger than me. There's over a decade between you. I admitted there was an element of spite and revenge in initially choosing Cedric. But more than that, it was about family honor and the rules of our social circle. Besides, Cedric was superior to Leo in every way. Age isn't an issue. Leo, I said, raising a brow, then deliberately, right in front of them, quickly kissed Cedric's cheek with a crisp smack. As for revenge, at the cost of my marriage, do you think you're worth it? I leaned against Cedric's shoulder, my smile sweet yet barbed. Hurry up, call me Mom, otherwise I might suggest your father consider a more sensible son. Leo trembled with rage. Father, are you just going to let her be this insolent? Cedric finally looked up, sweeping a cool glance over him, just as Leo thought his father would uphold justice. Cedric reached out and gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear. Since when could I ever control her? His tone even held a hint of indulgence. Besides, Amelia is now my wife. You should respect her. Calling her mother is only appropriate. Leo's chest heaved violently. Having been a pampered young master for over 20 years, when had he ever suffered such humiliation? He turned to leave, but felt his hand gripped tightly by Luna. Looking down into her tearful, aggrieved eyes, thinking of their future happy life, he swallowed his pride. For Luna, I'll endure it. Mom, the word was practically ground out between his teeth. Oh, such a good boy, my eldest son. I laughed heartily, not hiding my delight. Amelia. Leo's face was dark as a pot. It's Mom, I corrected, pulling a thin, prepared red envelope from my small handbag, walking over, and stuffing it into his hand. Here, son, a token for the new address. Leo didn't want to take it. This amount was nothing to his former self, but Cedric's cold voice rang out. Take it. Gritting his teeth, Leo accepted it in humiliation. Thank you, Mom. You're welcome, I beamed, sitting back down to enjoy my belated breakfast. Next, it was the little white flower's turn, and this is my future daughter-in-law. I looked Luna up and down. In person, she seemed even more delicate than in the photo. White dress, blonde hair, blue eyes. Certainly the standard innocent type, but the flashes of shrewdness in her eyes and the poorly concealed greed from earlier couldn't fool me. Only a spoiled fool like Leo would believe she was a harmless little flower. Hello, I'm Luna Green. Luna struggled for a moment, utterly unable to call this girl who looked younger than herself Mom. Oh, Luna, not bad. I offered an insincere comment and turned my attention back to my breakfast. Cedric dabbed his mouth with a napkin, his gaze shifting to Leo, his aura suddenly turning imposing. You came back just to question me? Leo remembered his original purpose, suppressing his anger. Father, why are all my accounts frozen? And the access to my cars and properties? Why, aren't you clear? Cedric's voice wasn't loud, but it carried immense pressure. You publicly ran away from your wedding, dragging the reputations of both the Montgomery and Moretti families through the mud. Do you have any idea of the ripple effects, the losses this will cause? Can you bear the consequences? Intimidated by this presence, Leo's legs felt weak, but to maintain dignity in front of Luna, he braced himself. I just want to be with the one I love. What's wrong with that? The error isn't in whom you love. I set down my fork and knife, interjecting coldly. It's in how you did it. Leo, we didn't decide to marry yesterday. If you were unwilling, you could have spoken up at any time. Running away on the eve of the wedding, without informing anyone, you trampled the Montgomery family's face underfoot for all to see. My marriage to Leo meant the Moretti heir would have the full backing of the Montgomery family. That was a key reason he could secure his heir position. Otherwise, there were plenty of capable cousins in the family. Why should it be him? Cedric waited for me to finish, then looked at Leo. Understood? Leo was speechless. he really hadn't thought that far. He was used to acting on impulse, used to others cleaning up his messes. I know I was wrong. He hung his head. Do you think there will be a next time? Cedric's tone was icy. No, never again, Leo hastily assured. You want to marry her? Cedric's gaze swept to Luna. Yes. Leo perked up immediately. Father, I love her. I want to marry her, Mr. Moretti. Luna also spoke up timidly, though her eyes couldn't help drifting towards Cedric. Leo and I are truly in love. I love him very much. T.S. I sneered inwardly. Fine. Cedric's word made both Leo and Luna brighten momentarily. But his next sentence plunged them into an ice bath. But if you insist on choosing her, you must renounce your status as heir to the Moretti family. Simultaneously, I will reclaim everything bestowed upon you, all assets, connections, privileges. The Moretti family will not support a worthless individual who only brings disgrace. Unless Leo could become strong enough to not need the family's protection, the Moretti heir could never marry a woman of unknown origin and no advantage. Father. Leo was incredulous. Just wanting to marry the one he loved came at such a tremendous cost? Luna panicked even more inwardly. This wouldn't do. She'd schemed so hard to latch onto Leo precisely to marry into wealth and live a life of luxury. If Leo lost everything, what was the point of marrying him? Leo, don't do this for me. She quickly grabbed Leo's hand, on the verge of tears. You're the Moretti young master. You have a bright future. Luna, don't try to dissuade me. Leo, moved by her consideration, clasped her hand with self-righteous affection. I promise to marry you, and I will. Don't worry. Even without the family, I can make a good life for you with my own hands. Watching one lost in self-righteous affection and the other inwardly bleeding over her failed calculations yet forced to put on a brave face, I could barely contain my laughter. In that case, so be it. Cedric said no more. You may leave, father. Leo tried to say something. Leo, let's go. Luna, her heart bleeding, had no choice but to play the understanding role, half dragging, half pulling the still tragically heroic Leo away. The door closed. I could no longer hold back, collapsing on the sofa laughing until my sides hurt. Ha ha ha. Oh my. Did you see Luna's expression? She must be cursing inside. That amused? Cedric came over helplessly, rubbing my king's stomach. Of course. I looked at him with sparkling eyes. Are you really casting him out? He has called you father for so many years. Many wish to call me father. Cedric said mildly, his fingers gently combing through my hair. Besides, he lacks a sense of responsibility and judgment, unable to see reality. Such character cannot bear the weight of the Moretti family. Serves him right to suffer a bit. I agreed wholeheartedly. Cedric was as good as his word. Orders were issued immediately. No one in the Moretti family was to assist Leo in any way. Leo's biological parents, Cedric's cousin and his wife, were also thoroughly disappointed in their son and flatly refused his plea for help over the phone. Determined to let him learn a lesson, Leo hit walls everywhere. In the end, he only managed to borrow a modest sum from some fair-weather friends. Combined with Luna's meager savings, they rented a small apartment, beginning his commoner life. Chapter 7. Life at the Bottom and False Promises. Leo's commoner life was 100 times harder than he imagined. Used to unlimited spending, he was now helpless with the limited cash in his pocket. Luna suggested she manage their finances, and Leo agreed without hesitation, handing over the borrowed money and his last remaining savings to her. Luna quickly found work as a waitress at an upscale cafe, while Leo's job search hit repeated dead ends. Bearing the Moretti name while applying for entry-level positions was suspicious in itself. Finally, through Luna's referral, he got a job at a small trading company. Starting at the very bottom, however, accustomed to being fawned over, Leo couldn't tolerate being ordered around by superiors or the subtle competition among colleagues. Within a week, he was fired after a fierce clash with his manager, even losing a portion of the money Luna had painstakingly saved. In their apartment, Luna suppressed her inner irritation, speaking softly. Leo, darling, you really must try to control your temper. What will become of us if this continues? Leo hung his head like a chastened child, muttering, I didn't mean to. But he was always ordering me around, mocking me. I know. Luna took his hand, guiding it to rest on her still flat stomach. But Leo, we have to think about the baby. I'm carrying your child. Leo's head snapped up, his eyes shining with surprise. Really? Yes. Luna lowered her head, her tone sorrowful. So Leo, you need to pull yourself together. If we can't give him a good life, I'd rather he not come into this world. No, Luna, I will work hard. Leo, motivated by this responsibility and a newfound sense of self-reliance, grew determined. I'll make a good life for you and the baby. Maybe you could beg Mr. Moretti and your parents? Luna probed. For the child's sake, they might soften. No. Leo unexpectedly held firm this time. I promise father I'd rely on myself. Luna, trust me, I can do it. Luna inwardly cursed him for a fool but could only continue playing the gentle, considerate fiancé. A month later, when Cedric and I returned to New York from our Hawaiian honeymoon, we bumped into Leo at the estate gate, coming to deliver something. I almost didn't recognize him. His once meticulously styled hair was rough, his face showed signs of weathering, his shirt was faded and slightly stained. He carried a bag of cheap supermarket apples and a box of ordinary pastries. Utterly out of place in these surroundings, seeing me, he scratched his head awkwardly. Amelia, I mean, Mom, I'm not here for money. I raised a brow. I just wanted to thank you. He placed the items on the ground by the gate and bowed respectfully from a few steps away. Thank you for what you said that day. If I hadn't been cast out, I might never have experienced another kind of life. It's exhausting now, but fulfilling, being with Luna, fighting for our future. I feel happy. The smile on his face did have a simple brightness, stripped of pretension. Looking at him, my feelings were mixed. In the end, I just nodded. As long as you're happy. Luna is pregnant, Leo announced with some pride. I'm going to be a father. I'll provide for them with my own hands. I was inwardly startled but kept my expression neutral. Congratulations. I wish you happiness. Leo seemed to have received the blessing he sought and left satisfied. Watching his roughened but straight-back retreating figure, I shook my head inwardly. Back in the villa, I relayed Leo's words to Cedric, mentioning the bag of apples the butler had taken in. Cedric made no comment, simply made a call. 2 hours later, an updated investigative report was in my hands. Look at this. Cedric handed me the file. I skimmed through it quickly. The report detailed Leo's life this past month, working construction, earning a few $100s a day through hard labor. How Luna budgeted meticulously their meager income. And, the most crucial page, Luna's child. I pointed to the forged prenatal report and the information on Jake, the thug she was secretly in contact with. It's not Leo's. And the timing doesn't match? Cedric acknowledged mildly. The child is about 6 months along, earlier than when Leo got together with her. I almost felt sorry for Leo. He was basking in the dual happiness of impending fatherhood and self-reliance, unaware of the verdant pasture above his head. Just wait a little longer. Cedric seemed to read my thoughts. It's almost time. H had people watching the pair all along, less out of concern for Leo, more to let me witness the climax of this drama in real time. Chapter 8. Betrayal and Awakening. As Cedric predicted, the climax arrived swiftly. Luna's belly began to show. She quit her job, citing health issues. Leo worked even harder at the construction site, handing over every cent he earned to Luna for safekeeping, keeping only bare essentials for himself. He felt guilty toward Luna and the baby, believing he was making her suffer. However, Luna's patience and calculations gradually crumbled under Jake's constant demands and sweet talk. Jake urged her. Leo had been disowned. There was no future. Better to take the remaining money and run away with him. One morning, after Leo had pulled 2 all-nighters at the site for overtime pay, he dragged his exhausted body back to their shabby apartment, only to find it empty. Luna had taken everything of value and the last of the bank deposits. The landlord informed him the lease had been terminated. New tenants were moving in that afternoon. Leo stood on the unfamiliar street, still holding the strawberry cake H bought for Luna because Shed said she wanted it. The early winter wind cut through his thin jacket, but he felt no cold, only a bone-deep sense of bewilderment and betrayal. Why? He spent the night curled on a cold park bench, his mind replaying every detail with Luna like a broken record. All that deep love and sacrifice now seemed like mocking lies. At dawn, he staggered to his feet and headed for the police station. He would report her for fraud. But just steps from the station entrance, physical exhaustion and mental collapse overtook him. His vision went dark, and he fainted. He woke again to the smell of disinfectant and bright hospital lights. Awake, I set aside the magazine I was reading and got up to pour him a glass of water. What are you doing here? Leo's voice was hoarse, clearly startled to see me. You fainted outside the police station. They contacted us, I stated matter-of-factly. Cedric is in a meeting. Hell come later. Leo drank the water silently, then murmured, "Thank you, don't mention it." I sat back down, observing his pale, haggard face. "What are your plans now?" Leo pressed his lips tightly together, fists clenching the bedsheet, just as I decided to leave and give him space. "Wait." He abruptly got out of bed, his legs giving way, and knelt straight down before me. "What are you doing?" I frowned. "I beg you." Leo's voice was choked with suppressed sobs and remorse. "I was stupid before, blind. I was wrong, truly wrong. Please, help me." To have this proud to the bone young master sincerely kneel and admit fault was no small feat. I let out a relieved breath and agreed readily, "All right." Leo seemed taken aback by my immediate agreement. "What? Thought I'd kick you while you're down?" I pulled a copy of the investigative report from my handbag and handed it to him. "Read this first, then decide if you still want my help." Leo's hands shook as he took it, eagerly scanning the pages. The more he read, the paler he became, his breathing heavier. When he saw the forged prenatal report, Luna's long-standing collusion with Jake, and that the child's father was someone else, a wounded animal's whimper escaped his throat. Tears fell in large drops onto the paper. "So, from the very beginning, I was just a joke." He laughed and cried, bordering on madness. I didn't comfort him. Some wounds had to be torn open by oneself to be properly cleansed. When his crying subsided somewhat, I spoke slowly. "Cedric can give you a chance to return to the Moretti group, starting from the very bottom. How high you climb depends on your own abilities. But the prerequisite is, you must completely bid farewell to the foolish, naive Leo Moretti of the past." Leo raised his head. His eyes were red and swollen, but burning with a near-ruthless light, a mixture of humiliation, betrayal, and awakening. "I accept." His voice was raspy but firm. "I will do it." Chapter 9. Rebirth and the Ending. Leo was true to his word. The next day, he entered an obscure department of the Moretti Group as an intern. No privileges, no special treatment. In fact, due to his former crown prince status, he faced more scrutiny and people giving him a hard time than others. But he endured it all, working tirelessly, studying relentlessly. Cedric occasionally checked on his progress and gave the rare assessment of adequate. As for Luna and Jake's happy life, it didn't last long. After squandering the money taken from Leo, conflicts between them escalated. After one violent argument, Luna went into premature labor, giving birth to a stillborn baby. She also suffered a major hemorrhage, losing her ability to have children. Jake quickly grew weary and disdainful of her. Luna, in despair and hatred, swore to haunt and pester Jake for the rest of her life. The two were locked in a mud pit of mutual torment, finding no peace. When I later recounted these developments as gossip to Cedric, he was leaning against the headboard reading a file. His only comment was a mild, "Reaping what they sowed." Years later, through his own ability and drive, Leo finally secured a stable mid-level position within the group. He became steady and capable, a far cry from his former self. He could even face Cedric and me calmly, sincerely addressing us as mother-father. As for Cedric and me, through an adjustment period and time spent together, we discovered we were unexpectedly compatible. He wasn't as cold as the rumors suggested. He simply reserved all his tenderness and indulgence for family. 3 years later, we welcomed a little angel, our daughter, Emma. Emma perfectly inherited Cedric's deep features and my hair color. Like a delicate doll, Cedric, faced with this miniature version of his own face, often seemed at a loss, whereas I took endless delight in dressing her up, buying all sorts of cute matching family outfits, enjoying the mischievous pleasure of dressing the aloof Titan as a cuddly dinosaur. Cedric always responded to this with a tolerant sigh, only to reclaim it all with interest in the quiet of the night. Life continued peacefully and contentedly, filled with the simple, everyday joys of domestic life, occasional minor squabbles, and reflections on the past tinged with both poignancy and release.